And we're going to do it in this, just so you know, Brian, we're going to, let me see, we're going to do this, we've got it set up so we've got Brian, Deborah, Barbara, and Sherry in that order, sort of in terms of just how you're set up. Usually I use the ballot listing, but since I can't seem to find mine, I'm using our listing just as something random that we used in the paper the other day. So, and we'll start with you, Brian, but here's what we're going to do. What we're really interested in is policy-related issues and policy-related expertise. So, starting with you, Brian, I'd like to hear very quickly what policy credentials you bring to the table, and then real quickly, what are the bullet points, what are the top 3 issues that concern you?
So from a policy standpoint, I've been attending board meetings for the last 3 years. I've also attended Parent Advisory Committee, Community Advisory Committee, Budget Advisory Committee, School Closure Committee, and Clayton Valley Charter Committee meetings. I'm sure there's some other committees that I haven't thrown in there. But so I've been attending those for the last 3 years. I have an MBA from UC Berkeley, which I think one of the big roles of the school board member is the financial aspects of it. And I've also been an executive at startup companies where budgeting and being tight with the dollar and making sure that every dollar is justified and stretches as far. I also have a BA in political science. And then I think from a policy standpoint, the fact that I've been endorsed by
not interested in endorsements right now.
Superintendent Tom Torley,
Brian, Brian,
Buchanan, and Bonilla.
Brian,
in terms of
Brian.
Yes.
Not interested in endorsements. I'm just interested in your policies. We just got to move through this. I don't want everybody running campaign speeches. All I want is your credentials you bring to the table and your top 3 issues.
Sure. Top 3 issues. 1 is fiscal accountability. 2 is student achievement. And 3 is openness and transparency.
Thank you. Okay. Deborah.
I've worked for the district for 22 years. I was on many site councils, PTAs, many district committees.
What did you do for the district?
I was an instructional assistant for 22 years. I wanted to work part-time while I was raising my 2 daughters. And after my youngest turned 18, I went to full-time work. I served on the Committee of Practitioners for California Department of Education, which oversaw Title I policy for the whole state of California. I also served on the California School Board's Child Nutrition Advisory Committee that oversaw policy for nutrition for the whole state of California. I've been on the Municipal Advisory Council out in the Bay Point community, which we set up policies and procedures for our community. I think I set up the first junk food policy in the after-school world for not allowing any junk food on any of the campuses during after-school hours, which went on to get a lot of notice throughout the state, and others have followed suit. I helped write the Healthy Snack Manual that's used by the California After School Resource Center for all programs in California. My top 3 issues would be every child getting the education they need to succeed in life, to be communicating openly and honestly, and to make sure that the schools reflect the communities that they're in, that we don't use a cookie-cutter approach.
Okay, every child getting the education they need to succeed in life. What were the other 2?
Open and honest communication.
Mm-hmm.
And schools that reflect the communities that they're in, so we don't have a cookie-cutter approach to education.
Okay. Barbara.
I am a retired Mount Diablo Unified School District employee. I worked for the district for 24 years, 13 years as a teacher of students with special needs, 5 years as a high school vice principal, and 6 years as a high school principal. Prior to that,
Which high school?
College Park High School. Prior to that, I was an administrative assistant for a trust fund, a union trust fund, which was a $10 million trust fund that I worked with
What union is that?
Muni Drivers Transport Workers Union, Local 250A, out of San Francisco. I have served on about 7 WASC accreditation teams. Those are the teams that give accreditation to high schools throughout the state. I, of course, have attended many board meetings and been involved in numerous reports and school procedures. My 3 main issues are students matter most, equitable education for all students, achievement for all. Partnering with parents and community. I believe we must get the parents and community involved with the schools, within the communities within which they serve.
You're going to have to talk up a little bit louder because I'm not sure what's going on somewhere else in the building. But yeah, just speak up a little louder. Partnering with, I'm sorry, what?
Parents and community.
Okay.
And support for teachers and staff at school site levels.
Sure.
So my work experience is that I have a bachelor's degree in computer science with a minor in business administration. I have been, my career in the IT field is around managing projects and working on projects. So I've managed and been on projects with multi-million-dollar budgets. In the school area, I've been
Pardon my not knowing this after all these years, but who do you work for?
Chevron. As a parent, I was on the, I've been in the parent faculty committees or PTAs. I've been on site councils. I've been on the English Learner Acquisition Committees, ELAC. I have been a board member for 4 years. Prior to being elected on the board, I was also a member of the Parent Advisory Committee and the Budget Advisory Committee. I've attended many trainings with the California School Boards Associations also for
And
policies. So my 3 areas are student achievement, that it gets every child ready by the end of high school for college, career, or military. My second one would be communication, and my third one would be attracting and retaining highly qualified staff.
Okay, let's start working backwards. Sherry, give me your assessment of, and I want to word this carefully because I realize the many variables from the state that are in play here, but of the financial challenges and the financial successes as you see them quickly for the district. You know, how do you think we should be viewing the district's financial management at this point?
So are you asking about financial management or our challenges with managing the money we have?
Well, why don't you try both?
Oh, okay. So I'll try to do that quickly. I think in our management, if you looked at our audit compliances, how we're dealing with our money, we're dealing with the money appropriately and legally to the mandates of the law from an audit standpoint.
Well, I hope so, yeah. That's
But
a low bar.
well,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
been some questions. So yes, that's done. So if you're looking at our challenges, we have done significant reductions in staff, primarily a lot of that at Debt Center and in all of our unions, because of the lack of funding that we continue to get from the state. So our challenges are moving forward. How do we continue to educate our children and attract and retain staff when the funding we get per child has been decreasing over the years?
The funding. And
We receive from the state.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the numbers. I had them here, I believe, but your enrollment is declining, right?
Right. But also the per ADA, average daily attendance dollar we get from the state has been fluctuating and
you're
declining.
basically, if I remember correctly, at about if I recall correctly, you're just about at the state average per student, if I remember correctly. Does that sound about
We're
right?
below state average.
By how much?
I don't remember the exact number.
Okay, all right. your sense of it?
My sense of the challenges are, as Sherry said, there's just the money coming in currently is not enough to fund all of the programs that are in place within the district. There's just not enough money going into the school sites to give the students the education and the instructional materials that would give them the best opportunity to be successful. One of the big challenges within Mount Diablo, I believe, is that we are funded at a lower rate than most of the surrounding districts. San Ramon is, I believe, a basic aid district. Acalanes gets funded higher because they're a high school district. So with our staff, a lot of times they see the other districts around us that are getting more compensation for staff. So in the last years when I was there, I saw a lot of staff leaving because they were getting employment opportunities in the districts surrounding us. So we would get good staff in, give them a lot of training, and then a lot of them would head out to somewhere where they were being compensated at a higher rate. So to me...
So what's the solution?
What's the solution? The solution is to look at every program that is being funded, to see if there are ways that everything can be cut a little. Do we have to have everything there? Can we give some funds into other areas? Can we get some of the administrators that are working at Den Center, and I know they're working at a very basic level, can we get some of them out to the school sites doing some of the work at the school sites so that the administrators at the school sites can get into the classrooms and give the teachers a bit more support so that the students have the benefit of more support from the site administrators, and teachers feel that they can do a better job because they have the support at the site.
There's clearly been a problem with money in the last few years, and if 30 doesn't pass, that's going to continue to be a problem. But the bottom line is we're there to educate kids, and we need to find a way to do that. Challenges, some of the things that have happened that I questioned was when they closed Glenbrook School as opposed to Willow Creek. Glenbrook had a lot of grant money attached to it that was lost to the district. And I still would consider closing Willow Creek. Successes might be that supposedly there's millions of dollars coming in now from the solar. I'd want to take a look at that and see exactly where that money is going, how that's being used to help kids. And I know when I used to oversee program, it was very important to be run effectively. You have to make sure you have the right people doing the right jobs. And some of that might be looking at the administrative level and what exactly are those job duties. Could some of those job duties be combined into one position? But I think the cuts have to be made as far from the classroom as possible. I think the cuts have to avoid furlough days as much as possible. The best way to educate kids is not by taking them out of the classroom. It's by having more time in the classroom. And there's a lot of grants that come into the district that I think you could look at. One of the things I was successful with in the after-school world was partnering with other agencies and bringing grants in and finding out how you could get more bang for your buck by combining your money with other agencies' money to move the kids along as you want. And so partnerships and looking at the positions and making sure, like I said, the right people are doing the job and the jobs are being funneled in a way that's best for kids' education.
Brian?
Yep. So the district is stayed out of state receivership, so that's a positive.
The state is what? I'm sorry, what did you say? The state what?
I said the district is stayed out of state receivership, so that's a positive. But, in terms of school districts, every school district is facing cuts in funding, so we're not unique in that. So I think we just have to look within to see how we're going to do that. A couple of examples. One, during the 80s, we were at about 50,000 students. We're now down to 34,000, and I think that's attributable to people voting with their feet. And so they've left the district and gone to private schools or moved to other areas. And that ADA funding needs to be spread out across, administration and things like that. Have we had corresponding cuts in administration? I don't believe that we have. There's been a lot of shuffling of administrators who've now retired and become contractors, and the argument's been made that, well, those are coming from different funds, but it's still taxpayer money that also goes to how we treat, just what our attitude is towards money and how fiscally tight we are. Solar was mentioned. We went ahead and put solar up at the 2 schools that were closed. I don't know that that was a good decision, and I would question that very closely. And then finally, I think we need to look at things like Mount Diablo High School lost a $1.5 million CLIA grant due to not filing a bell schedule properly. And it was blamed on, well, the person who did that left. And one of the questions I asked the board and the superintendent and have not received an answer to is, who was responsible, what have we learned, and how are we going to make sure this doesn't happen again? And so it was overturned, it was appealed to the state, and we received the funding. But that's the type of thing where we need to be strict financially and make sure we have mechanisms in place to get every dollar that we can.
Okay, let's stay on money for just a quick second. We'll start with you, Brian. You guys probably know our thinking on this, but give me your thinking on Measure C.
So I supported Measure C. I'm concerned about how, one, the bonds were structured, and I think that the board should have stepped up much earlier to say that here's how we're looking at structuring them. And I think they did a disservice and went back on a promise to the community, which is going to make it much tougher to ever go back for a parcel tax when the district said we're going to keep it at $60 per 100,000 of assessed value, and then went back on that. And how now the alternative was to be paying back astronomical interest on each dollar borrowed. So I don't think that was an option either. But I think that the district did not do the due diligence and did not share that adequately with the public.
So you would have done what? Because the $60 limit was and is a legal requirement at the time of issue.
The board has now overturned that, and so the board will now be issuing in excess of $60 per 100,000 of assessed value. That was voted on and passed in, I want to say, March or April of 2012.
Is that right, Teresa?
Yeah, because
I'm sorry if I don't remember it.
it's the 2002 and 2010 bond measures combined.
Each one has their
Hold
own.
on, what? I'm sorry, what?
It's the 2002 and 2010 measures, so it's $60 per 100,000 from each of the 2 bonds.
So they're going to exceed the 60 limit combined,
Right.
but stay within the legal requirement on each.
Yes.
Okay, by accelerating the 2010 issue.
Yeah, I guess that's what's happening.
And I think that there should have been more discussion with the community, more, I think that there was a lack of understanding and research, obviously, on the district's part. That was on the ballot statement that we were not going to go above $60 per 100,000 of assessed value, and I think that severely hurt the board's credibility.
I think I even wrote about this since then, and I'm sorry if, it all starts blowing. I always have to go back and remember what's going on. But, okay, so, Deborah, what about that?
I think the whole thing was handled badly. I think the public was left feeling like they were lied to. I think they wanted to pass an assessment. It didn't pass, so they tried to come around the back door and do a measure because they thought that would pass, which it did. But then it was for this solar project, which a lot of people out in the community don't understand or didn't feel like it was what they were looking for. And the unfortunate thing in the whole mess is now it's going to be really hard to get an assessment passed because people don't trust them any longer. They felt like they weren't told up front what it was going to cost them. And then even though it seemed logically to make sense to go ahead and restructure it, it was going to be less interest, people still felt like, well, I was told one thing, but they did something else. So it's a big mess that we now have to live with, and I think the only way you're going to get an assessment, and I think the approach they should have taken in the first place, is to build relationships, be honest and upfront with the community, and they will support you, and that would solve the problem that Barbara referred to, where other districts all around us are being able to pass those assessments. And I think the fact that they're not is because people aren't feeling like they trust the district, and when they go to the school board meetings, they're not being treated very nicely. So that's pretty much how I felt about it.
Okay.
I was also a supporter of Measure C. I felt, and I still feel, that any funds that are coming in for the benefit of student learning and student achievement has to come into this district. We just have to
I'm
do
sorry, all the funds, what?
all the funds that must come in for student learning and student achievement. We had to get funds in some way. The Measure C.
What do you mean you had to get funds?
We had to get money coming into the district. We'd lost, there was a previous measure that had gone out, or a parcel tax, and that wasn't passed. So this was a way of getting some funding into the district, putting in not only solar, it was also for student learning, widening the internet band so that there could be more usage of the internet for students in classrooms. They're doing some individual work at school sites, air conditioning, and some of the schools that have had no air conditioning and the students are living in or learning in uncomfortable conditions. The part that does bother me, and I was very much opposed to it, if you make a promise to the public is this is what you're going to request from them back, then that promise must be adhered to. You have to investigate it much further before you put the measure out, knowing that this was going to go out for 40 years or so. By the time all of the funds are spent, the funds are going to be spent, all of them mostly up front. The next 30 years, people are going to say, what are we spending these
Okay,
monies for?
I want to probe here for a quick second. Well, let's go to Sherry, and then we're going to double back here because I want to understand how much everybody understands about this. Go ahead, Sherry.
Okay, so Measure C was originally passed, the 2010 Measure C, because there's a 2002 Measure C.
We're familiar, right? Okay, we're
So,
talking 2010.
2010 Measure C, and I did support it at the time I voted for it. So it was passed, and it was to do more than solar. It was to do infrastructure, science labs, individual school.
348 million, about 70 million, as I recall, for solar. The rest for construction. I remember all of that. Go ahead.
So, okay. So with that going on, then parents came to us and said, could you please accelerate the bond sale so that we could do some additional projects at schools? So this was a community-led effort to come in and ask the board to restructure the bonds to go up to the max of 60 per issuance of bond sales so that they could do additional
Let me
projects.
ask you a question, Sherry. And you're the only incumbent in this race. This was a community-led effort by some parents who came to you.
And there was a taxpayers group in part of it too, yes.
But this was a ballot measure that was a community-wide vote.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think a group, community group, should be able to come to you and that you guys should be able to change the rules of the game after you promised the voters and you got the vote based on a completely different promise?
After going out and doing polling and getting the results from the polling of the same voters, yes. We did polling. We did polling after the parents came to us to see how does the community
And
feel
have
about
they
it.
provided the polling?
Yeah.
Okay. And what did the polling exactly say?
That people would prefer spending the money up front than the long-term interest.
And is there any value in a campaign then? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is polling is different than conducting a campaign on the same measure. You had another alternative, and that was simply not to issue as many bonds and stay within your limits. And that's actually what you promised the voters you do. There were many, many problems with this bond measure in terms of the financial structuring of it. And you boxed yourselves into a corner that was clear from the get-go that we wrote about at the time, right? I mean,
I disagree with your editorial comments on that, totally, so.
Okay, how did you disagree?
Well, you were using the high-end interest rate that we had yet to reach in selling the bonds. The editorial that the Times wrote had to deal with the 5 to 6%. We haven't sold a bond near that amount of sale. So the amount of interest accrued and everything is not nearly
What
it was.
what is your debt ratio going to be?
I don't have the numbers right here in front of me.
4 to
look at.
1? 3.5 to 1?
It's 3.5. It's not above 4.
Okay. So 3.5, do you consider that an acceptable debt ratio?
I think that compared to what other school districts are getting, yes, it was.
Well, actually, school districts right now going out, not one of them is proposing a 3.5 debt
Well, that's
ratio.
what that was the max says. It may be lower than that. To be honest, I don't know what it is right now. I did not come with those numbers sitting here, right here in front of me.
Okay. And actually, the editorial comment at the time was based on your district's own numbers at the time.
I know, they were a hypothetical number.
They weren't a hypothetical. They were the very numbers on which you based your ballot statement. Because those were the numbers that we asked for. We said, how did you arrive at the numbers you have? Show us the
And that
scenario.
was high end, not low end.
That
not middle
was
of the road.
what they provided. That was the information they were putting out. If there were different numbers to be put out at the time that you were aware of, nobody put them out. Because believe you me, I was the one who went and asked for them. And I didn't say, give me the high end.
Are you done?
I said, give me the specific numbers on which you based it. So, help me understand why, there's been discussion about voters being misled. Help me understand why it is that you don't feel voters were misled.
I think that we went out and we said that this is what we were going to do, and we did when it's kind of like getting new information. We went and polled folks to see if they liked the new if they were with it. You had another alternative. I think what we did was better for the students. And so when others get on board, they can stop the sale of the bond issuance, and we could stop the projects that go on if that's what they think is the right thing to do.
Well, how would you stop the sale? How far along are you now?
Well, we still have at least 77 million that haven't been sold.
So you've sold 270 of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then they could stop the projects that are going on at the schools.
So, Barbara, how would you have structured this? And do you, let me ask you, what do you think about the carrying costs?
The
of bond
carrying
issue?
costs?
The carrying costs.
You mean the costs that the public's gonna have to pay for?
Yeah.
Okay.
And here's why I ask you this.
Okay.
Your response was that we had to get money basically into the district for the students.
Mhm.
Okay?
Mhm.
And what I assume you're basically saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, okay, because I want to understand what you're saying in terms of technical.
Mhm.
The money coming in for operations
Right.
was a transfer through the solar project,
Right.
right? Okay, which was only 70 million of the 340 million, if I remember the rough ballpark numbers. And I may be off in 10 million here or there. Okay, so that wasn't the primary goal, supposedly, although we obviously didn't think much of this sleight of hand to get operations in through a bond measure. But I guess my question is, at what price? Did you did you have to get money in? It was a very expensive bond measure. Your argument carried to its extremes would mean, and it seems to suggest at any price. Where was your boundary? And why was this within your boundary?
Okay, my understanding was that the money coming in from the solar was going into the operations, and then that would relieve some of the funding, so then that could be spent for teacher compensation or health benefits or classroom supplies or whatever. That was my understanding of
For
what
the
was
for 70 million of it, that's exactly right.
for the 70 mil. Okay.
Right.
So, beyond that, honestly, that wasn't really made clear that there was going to be 200 million in my eyes anyway. It was never made clear to me that there was going to be 200 million more where there was not going to be coming in pass through, so to speak, money that can go into the other areas. I thought that was all coming out of what was coming in through the solar. And now all of this other work that's being done for the other 200 million, that's the part where I'm saying now we're putting in all this money. That's above and beyond. I'm maybe now what Sherry is saying about we could stop selling some bonds. I think maybe we should go back out to the public and say, now, do we want to put a stop here? Because when you're talking about polling, I know I was never polled. I know that I was certainly saying, no, we can't do this. We made a promise. I was part of that promise to the community that we were only going to be charging so much. So maybe we do need to go back out now and say, look, this is what we've done. We've got this money. We're charging you for the next 40 years on your tax bills. We've got the solar installed, and do we need to stop now? Because we don't want to put any more debt out there for infrastructure that is coming in that within 10 years may be outdated.
So you see the solar was the primary purpose for doing this?
That was my understanding of it. That's when they came to me and said, do you support putting in solar to get this pass-through money so that we could release money out of the general fund so that it would go for the students?
Okay, so you weren't aware of the other construction?
I really wasn't. This is, Paul, you're kind of bringing it all up to me now. But I know it's going on now because I've, of course, read about it and I've
Deborah?
seen what's going on.
Thanks. I'm sorry.
It was very difficult for me, Measure C, because I actually did not support it and did not vote for it. And I have been involved with this district since 1960 when I started kindergarten. I've been on committees, my kids have went here, and it was hard for me to vote against something that was for the schools. But I just was not comfortable with the way it was set up. I was not comfortable with passing on this debt to my grandkids. And, you know, as far as the polling the people, I went to all of those meetings except for one. And there was maybe 10 people at most of those meetings that gave their opinion. Now, I don't know what other polling they did, but at those meetings, it was, Teresa was usually there, I was there, a school board member was there. You saw the parents that moved the event forward was there, so maybe you had 10 people that were just from those communities giving their opinion. And I agree with you to then redo a vote based on a very, very slim minority, if you can even call it that, sampling of the district, leaves people feeling like they don't trust the district. And that is a mess that if there's a new board, we're going to have to deal with is now what do we do with these measures? And now how do we get needed money into the schools because we're looking like a district that can't be trusted.
Brian?
So I do not agree with the idea that we have to bring money into the district at any cost, because there's no such thing as free money, and it has long-term implications, and I think we have to be aware of that. When Measure C first came up, and you had published the projections that it could cost $1.6 to $1.8 billion to repay, I asked those questions of board members, and I was directed to John Isom, the bond advisor, and I was told that no, those were worst-case projections. And every board presentation that I've been to in the last 2 years has talked about how the funding is actually going to be, the borrowing costs are going to be less than 2 to 1 in terms of repayment. Now, with the capital appreciation bond, we are looking at $8 or possibly even more, and I think that's absolutely outrageous. So I don't think there can be any possible justification for spending that money. And the district is not required to spend the money. They do not have to sell the bonds. It's that they're allowed to go up to that amount. And
Brian, let me ask you.
Yep.
Let me ask you a question. Since you're the MBA in this group here, have you seen the spreadsheet from ISOM on the carrying costs?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen spreadsheets transposed onto PowerPoint. One of the things that I've said about the district is this district does a horrible job of sharing that information prior so that people can look at these things and ask thoughtful questions. But everything I've seen for the last 2 years when it talks about the carrying cost is that for each dollar borrowed, we're spending less than $1 in interest over the repayment.
Have you seen the projection sheet of what the assessment rate would be and what the carrying cost would be through the life of the approved bonds and the previously approved bonds?
I have not seen what the assessment chart would be over the life of the bonds. I may have missed that, but when I've seen the presentations, I have not seen that included. It was one of the things I have asked, and I have not seen that.
Did you see ISOM's spreadsheet that was provided to us as the justification for the $60?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Did you ever see the original ISOM spreadsheet that was presented to us as the justification for the $60?
No, I did not.
Okay. Has there been an updated spreadsheet on that, do you know?
The last one was, we had something in either June or August. I'm trying to remember when ISOM came. And looking at Teresa, I don't remember when he was last there.
Yeah,
It
but
was
he
May or
doesn't,
June.
as Bren said, he doesn't give those spreadsheets in his PowerPoint. He just talks about what's been done so far. The most recent spreadsheet I saw was the one he gave you.
The one back in
April.
2010.
No, in April when they decided. to
Okay, yeah, I have, that's right. There was one that was
April,
back in.
yeah.
Okay. And I don't, that's right. I do have one from April of 2012. I forgot about that. Okay. So let's sort of change gears here for a second. Get off the bonds. I'm sure everybody will be happy to do that. And what I want to understand next is there are sort of two issues that are kind of overlap. So let's start with one of them. What do we make of the huge push for the the complete charter high school? What is the message here, and what are the goods and bads of it? Starting with you, Brian, that you see in that?
So I think the message loud and clear was that there was a segment of the community that was very unhappy with the district. This was a teacher-triggered charter conversion. I think the site surveys of other schools have shown unhappiness. When I'm out there talking to teachers and talking to parents and talking to staff, they feel that the district is unresponsive and in an ivory tower and not understanding the needs of the individual school sites. There was a lot of talk about here's what the cost to every other school in the district is going to be because of how California funds the district as a unified district, and then how the district passes those costs along to the individual high schools. One question I had was, well, if that's the case, if Clayton Valley, if the entire feeder pattern went charter, would that then negate that impact? And I got well, we think so, but I think that there's a lot of uncertainty. It was very difficult for the district to ever return results of here's what the net impact is going to be when we factor out the cost of operating the school minus the funding. I saw at least 3 or 4 different numbers that were hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars apart. And so I think that it's really unfortunate that members of the Clayton City Council came to the district afterwards, came to the board and said, we would like to work with you. And now we would like to put this past us and work with you. The board showed no interest in doing so. I think that was really unfortunate. I went to the opening night, the parent night for Clayton Valley, and I think there's a lot of enthusiasm. There's people who are very excited about it. I think it's something we need to watch closely. I think that we should be rooting for their success because they're still our students and they're still part of our community. And I think we should take a look, and I think there are things that can be learned in terms of efficiencies. And someone gave me the example that the principal there has really focused on attendance and actually sharing with the parents. If we're able to bump average attendance from 97 to 98%, here's what that means in funding, and then here's some of the type of extra things we can do with that. And they've actually seen an uptick in attendance because of that focus. And I think that's the type of thing that we should look at and say, great, is that something we can replicate across the district? And then I think on the flip side, in terms of the negative, I think that we have to make sure that, there's a remaining feeling of being part of the community, and I think we have to, since it's the first year and there's going to be hiccups, that we have to tightly monitor it, and both from an academic standpoint and a financial standpoint.
And what's your takeaway, and where would you have been had you been on the board regarding the district's resistance to this?
I think that I wanted to see more information from the charter before voting to approve, but I think they should have been given greater cooperation and greater latitude to go ahead and do that before a final vote was taken. And I don't think they received that opportunity.
They should have given, who should have given? The district?
The district should have provided, the requirements were quite onerous, and it seemed like the deck was stacked against the charter from what I observed, and that it was kind of a moving target of here's what you need to achieve in order for us to approve this. And I think that the people at the charter were at a point where they said, no matter what we do, we don't think that the district is going to give us a fair hearing. We'd rather just have this, have the no vote and take it to the county, and that's what they did. And I think that was unfortunate. I think that more deliberation and actual collaboration and saying how can we work through the funding problem and how can we work through some of these other legitimate concerns before taking a final.
So you felt the district was too resistant? Would that be the fair word? I
think they were too antagonistic.
I think it's an indicator of how people are unhappy with the district that an entire school would want to pull out. One of the reasons I'm running for school board is because I attended all those board meetings and were appalled by the way those parents and teachers and students were treated. I thought there was an effort to pit one school against another, which is never good for kids. I felt that perhaps if the district had been willing to listen to the concerns of the school and deal with those concerns in a timely manner, they might not have wanted to break off and become a charter school. Maybe the things they wanted to accomplish could have been accomplished as with them remaining in the district. But on the other hand, I don't think being a charter school is a horrible thing. My grandkids go to a charter school. I think it can turn out to be something that's a positive for a district and an asset to the district, and I think we should be helping them and working with them as much as we can, because we are all about educating kids in the district. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And again, pitting kids against each other, it got really ugly, and I don't think people were treated kindly when they came to the meetings, and I think that's kind of why they ended up there, is because they felt that their concerns as a school were falling on deaf ears, and they felt like they had no other choice.
Barbara?
I think that the impetus behind the charter school was, of course, parents want the best education that they can for their students. I think in this case there was not enough communication with the parent community. There was not enough
enough communication by whom?
By the individual school site. I think that the school site in this case had a real responsibility to really listen to their parent community, to find out what the concerns were, and then to take it to the district offices and say, can we get your support, because this is the concern. I think it had gone on. The concerns were not addressed. I'm not even sure if the district office or the board was even aware of what the extent to which the community was feeling towards the school at that point. I have a real concern at this point that if we don't work together with the charter school and we don't build bridges with them, that the children who are in the K-8 MDUSD system that feeds into Clayton are going to jump from a unified school district system into a charter system, which may have some very different rules and expectations and requirements of the students. They have to make sure now, for the benefit of the students, that the curriculum is aligned, that the students are going to be able to move in a smooth transition from the K-8 system into the charter system. Am I opposed to a charter school? Absolutely not. I think that if the parents are going to go out there and support it, and they put together a qualified and knowledgeable staff of people who can run the charter and meet the needs of the students, then I would be in support of it.
Sure.
So prior to Clayton Valley asking to become charter, there is a charter school in the district that the board approved. It's Eagle Peak Montessori School. And the board has has approved their charter multiple times. With Clayton Valley, as a board member, I will say that I received very little parent concerns or staff concerns about the school prior to my knowledge of them wanting to go to charter. So it was I think, a surprise for some of us that they had gotten to that point of being that angry with the district, and that angry with the school. Let me say with the school level. It's unfortunate that they were not given another year to work with the new principal, who I had after that school received a new principal. I received several emails saying that they were good, and several discussions with parents saying that they really enjoyed it, but then they went charter and the new principal left and they became their own charter school. So it was too unfortunate that we couldn't have been able to work together. There is a loss of funds to the district for that charter, as the charter school said they would be, with the additional funds that needed to be paid from Mount Diablo to differentiate between a unified and a high school rate. I do think that we need to ensure that all of our students receive a good education and the best that we can provide, and that we want to make sure that our students in the Clayton Valley feeder pattern are able to move into that school being just as prepared for them as we want them to be for all of our high schools.
Respond to, if you would, Brian's word, too antagonistic. District was too antagonistic.
I'm not sure what he meant to say when we were antagonistic. I listened very openly and completely to what they were saying. I want to make sure that going charter would be beneficial to all of our students who would be able to go to that school. The concerns that I saw were based upon predominantly financial and curriculum based, and so that the list of issues the district had with those is to say, how are you going to handle the curriculum basis with the questions we have, and then here's the financials. And the financials between when the district denied it and the county approved it were changed. At the time the district denied it, we had to do 2 different budgets to ensure if the state cut budgets what they were going to be. We asked the charter to produce the same thing. It produced negative numbers, so it was not fiscally sound. When they went to the County Office of Ed, the state had alleviated those financial concerns.
Brian, what did you mean by too antagonistic?
Well, I mentioned the example that the fact that the Clayton City Council members came and said there was so much antagonism that they wanted to offer to meet with the board afterwards. Many of the parents who I spoke to at Clayton Valley talked about the fact that information in terms of budgeting was not shared in a timely manner. That it was Clayton Valley was being pitted against the other high schools, even though there's a legal requirement that the funding was not allowed to be part of the consideration, but that there were principals of other schools talking to their community saying this will be catastrophic for the district if Clayton Valley is allowed to go charter, and here's the implications. So when you talk to the parents at Clayton Valley, it was absolutely a very antagonistic from their perspective.
Sure, do you want to
that's to say that we didn't realize that there was a problem. I think that in and of itself is a problem, and I think
Brian?
that it's indicated. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, just wanted a short answer, not a long one. Sherry, so you want to respond to that?
So I think that I think that we as a school board member were listening to the parents as far as working with the city council. I'm not sure. Remember, Clayton has the Concord and Clayton Valley. They feed 2 cities. So as far as the meeting with the board, I do know that 2 board members have met with mayors from, the only mayor who did not show up at that meeting was the mayor of Pleasant Hill. So we met with all the mayors in our attendance area.
Let me ask a question, change gears slightly here. There has been a lot of discussion in all this. I keep hearing this theme about communication and openness and transparency. And I got to tell you, our experience has been pretty poor, to say the least. Let's start with you, Sherry. What's the deal? Why is this district, this is, from my point of view, one of the hardest districts to get information out of? I know Teresa's had a hard time getting information, and I hear this from the public a lot. What's going on?
Well, I could tell you that we are one of the most transparent districts when it comes to our agenda and posting things online as far as attachments available. Most other districts post a PDF file with no attachments on it to look at anything. So you can't go online to look at district board meetings to
That's
see what's
not my
coming
experience,
at.
but that's okay.
Well, you can go to Contra Costa Office of Ed, San Ramon Valley. They all have PDF files that you go to look at for the district and for the meetings. There's none of the attachments. I think that we are putting everything we can as far as we can out there, but we also are one of the districts in the area who do not have a public information officer. So we eliminated two. We eliminated two superintendent positions and a communications person many years ago, 3 years ago.
Well, you've done more than that. You guys as a district have literally, in our case, literally fought us on basic records requests. I mean, dug in your heels. This is an, we can discuss the business of, it's one thing the format in which you put it up online, but it's also the contents and substance, and we can go back to the bond measure, and there's a lot clearly, that was not put up there, and it's only when we asked for it that information even went public. But so we can talk about the substance of it, but there's also much more, which you guys as a district have literally, led by your council, dug in your heels on some pretty basic requests over the years.
So I listen to my counsel because he is the attorney who knows what the legalities and the laws are.
Do you ever see shades of gray there that maybe?
We as a board discuss things that are appropriate for discussion about it, and then the board gives direction to the council.
Okay.
For me, I think that all of us should be, well, I'm no longer an administrator there, but everyone who works in the district, especially at the administrative level, should be public information officers. We all need to be out there and listening and talking with people. I think one of the problems is conversation and communicating with people takes a long time. I mean, people want to sit and express their points of views, and even myself as an administrator within the district, I often felt like I was just cut short because the time wasn't there for people to put into it. So I think we all, as employees of the district, and I'm no longer an employee of the district, but the conversation, the communication, you have to put the time into it. And we are the public face of the district. It's not the board, it's not a few people who sit at Dent Center, it should be everyone. As far as communicate, I'm open. When I was principal of the school, anybody come in and ask me anything, here's my books. Let me show you what I have, because this is what it is. You can find the truth here, because once I show it to you, you can go on and make your own decisions.
Deborah?
I know when people, and I've heard in campaigning and talking to the public, and myself as well, when you go to the district and you ask a question or you raise an issue, if it's public comment, it's not on the agenda, there's not much they can do. They can maybe refer it to staff, but when it's an agendized item, they rarely will answer a question or respond. People get their public comment, someone makes a motion, they vote on it, there's very little discussion, and people are wondering, what are they basing their decision on? Because they're not discussing it here at the meeting. Are they discussing it in closed session? And I think what happens, what I want to hope happens, is as board members, they're asking questions that we don't know about and getting their questions answered, and that's what they're using. But it would take like 30 seconds to say when you're going to vote on something. When this initially came to me,
that would be a Brown Act violation, but that's a different issue.
No, I'm talking about though, if I had clarifying questions about an issue and I ask the superintendent and he gets me the answers, then when I'm voting on it, I could say, initially I was concerned about A, B, C, but these have been addressed. Then at least the public has a sense that you're doing some follow through.
So you don't feel like you understand why
their decision-making process. It's gotten to be where it looks very rubber stampish. You're there, there's a motion, there's a second, and then there's this, they used to go out in the community and have meetings, now they have this sense that they can't do that, it'll violate the Brown Act. I don't understand that. And then the other issue would be just, I myself made a request for public documents that should have been readily available to me that was denied. And it just, do I want to hire an attorney and follow through? I just let it go. But I understand he's an attorney, but there is a gray area.
Send us your response.
Okay.
We can take a look at this. Brian?
So the Brown Act was designed to provide more transparency, not less. So when the board and council claim to that, it's kind of befuddling to me. Things like the FICMAP report, which took months to come out in a final draft, and there was no reason for that, and it whittles away at the trust in the district. And then things like the superintendent, where he's having feeder pattern meetings, but the only way to find out about them is if the principal of your school tells a PFC chair, who then invites you, or you're on a PFC chair. And I think that's just not creating transparency. It's not building trust. I found out about the PFC meeting because I talked to Teresa about it. I asked Walnut Acres, which is in the feeder district, I said, is there a Northgate feeder pattern meeting coming up? And they said, oh no, it's not till November. It turns out it's the next night. So there's a pattern here of not being open and not being honest, and that erodes trust in the district.
Okay. Let me, you raised the superintendent. Can you, Brian, starting with you, can you please give me your evaluation of his performance, and would you please also address the campaign issues that were raised in 2010 surrounding the superintendent?
So, the superintendent serves at the, not pleasure, but, is hired and monitored and evaluated by the board. And I think that the superintendent has been following the board's instructions. I, as a board member, would be for more transparency, sharing things, and being out there in the community more, and having less of an autocratic, top-down driven environment, instead one that is more inclusive and actually works with people across the district. I think that the board chose to at first propose extending the superintendent's contract for 3 years, and I thought that was a mistake. And furthermore, there was one thing that I've repeatedly asked of the board is, what is your criteria for measuring the district and for measuring the superintendent? And they have not responded. And there's certainly confidentiality in performance evaluations, but as a board, you can certainly say, here is what we are looking for from the district. And if you're going to extend someone's contract, there needs to be some substance behind it. And I actually think they did a disservice to the superintendent by not providing that. But, I think that the superintendent has to be more transparent, has to listen more, has to be aware of things like what's going on at Mount Diablo High School, where there's an overwhelming vote of no confidence in the principal, and things like at Clayton Valley Charter High School.
Real quickly, would you please also in that address your thinking on the meetings that took place in the superintendent's home during the campaign?
So I just think that you have to, backdoor meetings with where you potentially have more board members. You can only have 2 board members, and so I think you have to hold closely to the Brown Act, and I think that you should be transparent.
I'm trying to remember, it wasn't just a Brown Act issue that was the issue at the time. It was
my recollection was that and maybe Teresa, I don't know if Teresa can ask. I mean, what I remember was their accusations about meeting at the Buttercup Cafe and things like that. But if you can ask me a more specific question, I'm happy to give more.
Correct me if my memory's slipping me, which may be. But as I recall, the meeting was at his house. It was with campaign donors who were potential beneficiaries of the bond measure. Do I remember correctly?
Well, Matt Krupnick actually covered this. It had to do with Chevron and with solar. And he was meeting with Chevron executives and also golfing with people to try to get the contract.
Does that refresh your memory?
Okay, so I only caught part of what Teresa said. So, I mean, there was the incident where the superintendent took and friends, I think, took a comp golf outing from Chevron. And I just think that, when you're the superintendent, you have to hold yourself to a higher standard. You have to be beyond reproach, especially when you're looking at, multi-hundreds of millions of dollars in bond issuance and who's going to benefit from that. And even the appearance of impropriety is unacceptable.
Deborah.
I'll start out by saying he's always been very polite to me when I've met with him, other than when he first came out, was first hired, he came and said he was happy to be at Riverside School and he was at Riverview School in Bay Point. And I thought that would be something I'd make sure I wouldn't do, being new to a district. And I was very unnerved about the reports of him having Chevron employees over for drinks to his house and getting golf tickets. That's not the behavior you want in someone who's running your school district. I think we're holding kids accountable. We want kids to do the right thing. Well, we should be modeling that behavior. And even though it could have been innocent, you got to hold yourself to a higher standard. It didn't look good. It made me very uncomfortable. And, I didn't feel like when they closed Glenbrook, he really had a clear understanding.
Yeah, no, my question had to do with the campaign and the.
Okay, but nothing about his performance.
I don't want to go too deep into Glenbrook because, okay. Barbara?
All I can say is I think he's doing the best job of what he knows how to do. Speaking with some people in the district right now, and even when I was still there, I feel that there is a lack of communication from his level to the individual sites, and that's the site administrators. I think there is some feeling right now that you can't go against what the superintendent says because there's a feeling that they're going to be losing their jobs. So for whatever reason, I don't feel that he is as good of a communicator as he could be. But as far as his qualifications, I think he's doing the best that he knows how to do. As far as the campaign, I think when you're a public figure and you're out there and there's thousands and thousands of people looking at what you're doing, you always have to be open. You have to be honest. You can't do anything that maybe even has a little bit of tinge of this isn't the right thing to do. So if you're going to have a meeting at your house about some campaign, you better open it up to the public and not just to a few people, because the public has the right to know, because that's who you're working for and that's who you should be answerable and accountable to.
Sure.
So I think that the Superintendent Lawrence is doing a good job when he looks at comparisons to what has happened in this district in the past. I think that when you're looking at the question about the meeting you had as at home, it was a Measure C meeting which could not be held on district property because that would be illegal, and you cannot have campaign elections or strategies being done on school property.
I think we would agree with that, but I don't think that was the problem.
So at the point in time, we were looking at solar and we needed solar expertise. So the district was working with a vendor for that already. So they continue to work with that same vendor. And there's Chevron has a high code of ethics that have to be agreed to by every employee. And I would say that unless an employee is ready for termination, that they would be following Chevron's code of ethics of what is allowed and not allowed to do.
Okay, I heard a lot, and I realize you're caught in front of maybe a conflict of interest.
I did not know about any of the meetings with Chevron. I did not know who was the vendor.
Was the meeting appropriate for the superintendent?
The meeting that the appropriate had for Measure C campaign, yes, he could have a Measure C campaign strategy meeting. Very appropriate.
With a potential vendor.
It could have been at that point in time. I didn't know that it was where that Chevron was a potential, or that anyone was a potential vendor. It was with somebody that they was helping them work the campaign.
So you don't have a problem with that meeting?
I did not have a problem because I didn't delve into what it was all about and what was going on, because at that point in time, I did not know about it.
Did you delve into it at all since we
Nope,
reported on it?
It was done, and there was no ramifications of what occurred at the meeting and where we're at today. And I'm sorry, I said I'd stay 10 minutes more. I have a work commitment.
Thank you, Sheriff. Final question, folks, and let's start with you, Barbara. In the education world, there's a lot of discussion of how best to evaluate teachers. Your thoughts, please.
I evaluated many teachers in my tenure as an administrator, and I always look at the evaluation process as one to go in and find the areas where teachers need support, where they need to be re-instructed, where they are to be given some assistance in finding that better way to reach the students. I always worked with my teachers to say, look, we need to have open communication back and forth about this process. What do you need me to come in there and see? I believe that teachers should be saying, this is what I need. I'm weak in this area. Can you come in and give me some help there? And that's how I always work with evaluation. That's how I see evaluation. If there is a real weak area, then they need to have improvement plans. They need to have the strategies so that they can improve to work for the benefits of the students.
Did you ever fire a teacher?
Did fire a teacher?
Yeah.
I let go many teachers before they were tenured. Within their first 2 years, yes, I did not have, I'd probably say 10 or more in the 6 years.
Did you ever fire a teacher who was tenured?
No.
Did you ever feel you had a tenured teacher who you would have liked to have fired?
Yes.
So tell me why you weren't able to do that.
Because of the tenure process, because of rights that people have for their own individual and personal rights, and because of the protections that tenured teachers do have.
Okay, so help me get to the core of this question is, are we keeping teachers that we shouldn't be keeping?
Very few. There isn't a large majority. What I saw in my experience, very few.
I would hope there's not even a large minority.
Well, there's not.
Right.
There's not a large minority. There's very few. What I saw, maybe one or two, maybe two, that in my experience that I would have said, other than the ones that I saw that I didn't move forward for tenure, maybe two, maybe three at the most.
And so what would you change for the process, or would you, so that, you know, I mean, one or two teachers is a lot of kids that they're exposed to. What would you change in the process?
If it was my perfect world, I would try to find them an alternate employment within the school system, because most everyone has something that they can offer, and they have strengths and weaknesses. If your strength is a credentialed teacher because you have spent many years getting there, and you have spent many years in learning what you have to learn to be able to teach, you must have a strength in something. It may not be in front of the classroom with the students. So my perfect world would be, let's find an area where that person has a real strength. Can they teach adults? Maybe they know a lot about the subject, the curriculum that they teach. Can they go around and be a trainer in that area? So I would look to find another area that they could be successful in.
I think the principals need to evaluate the teachers. I think they have their system. They need to see how they teach and how the kids perform, but I think there's a bigger picture of how they relate with everybody on campus. I've, over the years, either through my children going to school or me working at schools or partnering at the schools, some teachers are bullies. They're bullies, and they're tolerated, and I don't think that should be tolerated. I think that everybody, the same things we hold the kids accountable again for, we should hold the teachers accountable. And I think, you know, they need to get along with everybody. And I did come across teachers either that my child had or that I worked with that I felt shouldn't be teaching.
Let me just interject, just I'm curious, and I want to tap Barbara's background here. See, is the problem is you see teachers who are bullies, or is it teachers who are incompetent, if you will, or not good teachers? You know, I mean, I realize bullying is not a good trait in a teacher, perhaps, but is the problem generally bullies, or is the problem that you've witnessed a problem of not being able to convey material and actually teach kids?
You're asking
Yeah,
me?
for your experience.
Yeah, from my experience, if you have a teacher who is that strong in the classroom, I wouldn't call them bullies. I would just say that that's their personality traits, and that's who they are. They need a strong administrator to go in there and say, this will not be tolerated at this school. And that's just the way you have to put it. The administrator's got to go in there and they have to let them know, this is not acceptable. And I had to do that many times. And if you have a strong administrator at the school site, and that teacher then knows that you will get in there to support them and to give them the assistance they need, and if it's you need to go down there and take some of the kids out and say, look, you really need to sit in there, the teacher's offering you. It's the support that you have to give the teacher, and most times they respond. I'm not saying they don't slip back into that role.
Okay, but my question, I guess, is that what the problem was that you experienced, or is the problem, and I'm asking this frankly is the problem, because at the core, the basic issue is, are our kids learning, right? And so what is the biggest impediment to our kids learning? Is it the bullying teachers, or is it the teachers that are, I don't know, incompetent, or just not good teachers, or not effective? You know what I'm saying?
Most of the teachers that I observed, they understand their curriculum. They know what to teach. The problem is that sometimes they don't know how to teach. They don't know how to get a whole classroom, 37 kids at the same place at the same time. So they don't know how to differentiate enough. So then this leads to their frustration of throwing up their hands within the classroom. And some, again, it's their personality. They go out into their personal lives and they use a lot of foul language and they do a lot of this stuff, and sometimes it carries over to the classroom. So you just have to get in there and let them know this is not acceptable. This will not be tolerated. And
I'm just curious, and frankly, this was just much for my own curiosity, because Deborah raised that, and I thought, well, I don't know what the.
But there's several issues. And I've seen both. The bully teacher can not only be a bully to students, but to other staff and to the principal. I've seen that. Then you have the teachers that really can't spell and to me, shouldn't be in the classroom.
Okay, so let me ask you,
So
what would you do? The same question. What would you do?
But bottom line, it falls on the principal.
Dan, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm actually standing in the security line for a plane. Can I give a 30-second answer and then drop off?
Sure.
Ms. Mason and Ms. Oaks. So, I think the first responsibility of a site administrator is to be evaluating and coaching and recruiting great teachers. And so I think that principals, in large part, should be have extensive classroom experience, because they should be going in there, they should be coaching, they should be giving feedback, and then when necessary, they should be replacing people. And I think the thing I've noticed about teachers is that great teachers want to work with other great teachers, and that it actually lowers the morale of the entire school if you've got a bunch of great teachers and then there are a couple of subpar performers, and that affects everyone. And so I think that the district, we have to work. There's the PAR system, which is in place currently, which is in conjunction with Medea, and I think we have to work on that and make sure we address, that good teachers are celebrated, bad teachers, that we give them coaching. We can look at moving them. Maybe they're just not the right fit, but what I want to make sure is we're not just passing serial problems along and shuffling them around. And if they're not cut out for teaching them, we need to exit them from the district.
Brian, quickly, what is your cell number?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Your cell phone number?
650-219-7000.
And how long will you be on your flight?
For the next 2 hours or so. I can call you back in like 5 minutes once I get through security.
No. If I have questions later, I just need to know how to reach you. That's all. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay. Back to you, Jen.
Thank you.
And back to and then we'll wrap up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
right.
I think there's several issues, but ultimately it's the principal. I totally agree with Barbara. It's the principal that needs to be able to evaluate that staff and know who needs to be there and doesn't need to be there. But I will say, being involved in so many years with the district, what they'll do is, whether it's a custodian, a secretary, or teacher, they'll just move them off to another school and hope they have a better experience there, which is not acceptable. And I understand they're protected and that they have a union, but that does not mean that a teacher who isn't teaching can't be terminated. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of documentation. I actually, as a partner, when partnering at a site, was having problems with a teacher, and the principal says, "Oh, I need you to document. She's been a problem for years." And I'm like, well, now why am I, as a community person, coming in here asking to help document what you should have done, frankly, a long time ago? So it's a multi-pronged problem, but the bottom line to educating kids is quality teachers that care about kids in the classroom, and that falls on the principals to make sure that's happening at their site.
Folks, Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for this good discussion.